Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm here now with Lisa DeRose, our Carmel and Brewster branch manager. Lisa, thank you so much for being here with me today. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about what college freshmen can expect when it comes to managing their finances during their freshman year and also in college and beyond. Before we get into that, Lisa, why don't you give us a little bit of information about yourself?
Hi everyone. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I have been in the banking industry for about 20 years. I started straight out of college, and I was an assistant branch manager at a Boston bank. And in 2011, when I was back in New York, I was promoted to a branch manager. And I absolutely adore what I do. I love helping people. I love helping them with their finances, building those relationships. And it's just a great business to be in.
Thanks so much again for being here, Lisa. And I think that what you're going to be talking about today is really going to go a long way for these students. There's so much information out there, especially when it comes to managing your money in college. And I think this is really going to be beneficial. So with that, let's get started. Right now, we are in the summer before, college starts. Next August, everybody's going to be packing up the cars and getting ready for move-in day. But during the summertime, how should students really be financially preparing for their first semester at college?
I think it's a great idea to just prepare a budget for anticipated expenses.
Mhm.
I think definitely savings is key, to make sure that you're saving that money right now, because again, once you start school, who knows as far as the income stream, how that's going to be affected. And then as well as that, um, what I like to always tell everybody, encourage them to do is to work with their HR department and get a direct deposit set up, and take some of the funds and trying to sneak them into a savings account on the side where you're not really going to miss it that much. And you'd be surprised how quickly that can grow.
Yeah, that's great advice. So as students start to come into college, we're going to have some students who are going to be living on campus in the dorms, and we're also going to have students who are going to be commuting. Is there a difference in how students who are commuting versus students who are going to be living on the dorms, how they should be financially preparing? What should they be doing?
Absolutely. So I commuted myself personally, and that expense of gas and food, making arrangements, I wasn't the best meal prepper. So having that expense, it adds up quickly. A lot of the students that are at the school obviously take advantage of the meal plan, so that's helpful, but the commuters necessarily don't have that option. So that's key. Depending on the dorm style as well, sometimes you're not going to have access to that cafeteria 24/7. So having funds set aside just for that piece alone. Also, if you're in the dorm, what are you going to need? Toiletries, additional groceries, things of that nature. So making sure that you have funds for those needs and those purposes.
Definitely. And, I was a commuter too, and my Metro North bill per month,
Oh,
just between the parking, the tickets, and everything else, the subway card, was about $700.
ouch.
So, yeah. So, you never know how much these things are going to cost. So, to be able to have that money set aside just in case you need it and it's there when you need it, it'll be really beneficial.
Right.
So you did talk a little bit about budgeting and how that could really help students. When I was in college, I didn't have a budget set up, and I really wish I did. Um, could you explain a little bit more about why it's so important that students do have a budget before they get into college and also have one while they're still in college?
Right. So again, because you won't have that steady source of income and you're working on a budget, you are literally are forced to work on a budget. It's so important to make sure that you're taking into account those expenses that come up, because you never know when there'll be an emergency, when there'll be something that just out of the blue, the ordinary, will deplete a savings account.
Right.
You're going to stress out. You're going to make yourself a nervous wreck if you don't have these provisions in place. So if you get into that routine and develop that as part of your financial, I call it your behaviors, then even as going into adulthood and when you're living on your own and budgeting for rent and for car payments, things of that nature, it's just going to set that behavior in place and make it easier for you to adapt.
Right. That's so true. Also, when it comes to budgeting and figuring out, if you're going to be living on campus, for example, you want to make sure you have enough money set aside for your dorm too. A lot of times, dorming is actually, in some cases, more expensive than the tuition itself. Can students take out a loan specifically for dorming? And if so, would that fall under a student loan or a different type of loan?
So yeah, they can. It's a federal student loan that's purposely for dorming expenses.
Oh, great. That'll be really helpful for a lot of people.
Yes.
Um, a lot of students also are choosing to move to a college, either on the other side of the country in a different state, or maybe even in a different country altogether. So regardless of their chosen financial institution, how can students really manage their money while they're away at college?
So we have internet and mobile banking. Everyone has their phone on them all the time. So we have a great app that has so many tools, so many resources available at your fingertips. You can transfer funds, you can view account activity, you can look at prior statements. I mean, there's just a plethora of services within our app and our internet banking. So it really makes having to go into a branch kind of antiquated at this point. And if you don't need to do so, you really have so many options available.
Right. And so would that be the same for students who might be studying abroad? Is internet and mobile banking the best way for them to manage their money?
I would say yes. We also have a contact center and a magic phone option. So, depending upon if they have the ability to get on Wi Fi, which I think pretty much everywhere that's accessible these days, you can absolutely make the call or you could just jump on and you can access your accounts.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
So by the time students really get into college, they should have at least a checking and a savings account set up in their name. Can you give a description of what these types of accounts are and what they're used for, and maybe just any best practices you have with managing them?
Sure. So a checking account is a demand deposit account. That's technically the term in the banking world. So what that means is that it's essentially used every day in and out. That's the purpose of it. When you have a need, you use that account and you just debit from that account. A savings is exactly what it's called. It's a savings account. So you're typically putting funds in there for a rainy day fund or for, excess funds that you don't need accessible. Also, the difference between the checking and just the savings, you have the ability to have a Visa debit card linked to a checking. So that's helpful because, of course, when you're going to a vendor, you're going to a business, um, you don't necessarily want to be carrying a lot of cash with you just for security purposes. So that debit card, you can run it as a Visa. Whereas if you have a savings account, you're only going to have the access to an ATM card where you would need to go to an ATM and withdraw those cash funds.
Okay. And speaking of ATMs, where can
Mhm.
students go, if they're living off of campus or if they're living outside of the local area where their, chosen financial institution is, where can they
Right.
go to take out cash? And are there any fees associated with that?
Sure. So I'm glad you brought that up. So we are part of the All Point Network. And what that means is that it doesn't have to be a Hudson Valley Credit Union branch ATM that you go to. As long as you could see the signage on the ATM that says All Point, then you know you're part of our network. So there's 55,000 surcharge-free ATMs in the country, with 38,000 in the United States alone.
Wow.
So students should be aware some ATMs. So if you go to one that is not All Point, or if you go to one of another financial institution, the ATM should display that there will be a fee incurred to
Okay.
remove your funds at an additional cost.
Okay. That's really good to know. I think that'll be really helpful for students, living in all sorts of the world and all sorts of the
Mhm.
country. Um, when it comes to taking out cash and, when to use cash versus your debit card, what are some best practices for that? When would you advise that a student uses cash over their debit or credit card and vice versa?
Right. So I would say for small purchases, cash is great. Um, for larger ticket purchases and anything also, I would say through maybe an internet or something, a website, that is obviously best to use your card and use it through Visa because there are protections in place.
Mm,
There's fraud prevention and fraud protection associated with the Visa name. So I definitely think that that's something to keep in mind. And again, just piggybacking on the piece with the cash, most people don't feel comfortable walking around with large amounts of cash, nor do I recommend it. So if you're going to be making a large purchase, card is pretty much best.
And another thing to mention also about the cards is that they do come with rewards depending on
Yes,
your financial institution. So that's always an added bonus for especially for a shopaholic like me.
and me.
Yeah. Um, so when it comes to their card management, what should they do if their card is lost or compromised?
Right. So we want you to reach out to us immediately. So if you have the accessibility of getting into a branch, then please come to the branch. Or if it's more convenient, you can call and report it to us at the contact center. So we want to really, once you get any kind of notification, if you get an alert, that's something that we really need to act on quickly. And what we can do is if you come into the branch, we can actually issue you a brand new card right then and there. If you don't have access to a physical location, if you call the contact center, they will stop that card and they will get you a brand new card on its way.
Okay, awesome. So that'll just be sent to their campus when it's ready.
Correct.
Okay, sweet. So since 2020 and the start of the pandemic, we've really tried to reinforce the importance of having an emergency savings account on hand. Can you touch on a little bit of what an emergency savings account is, how to get one started, and maybe how to manage it as well?
Right. So an emergency savings account, it's typically those funds are reserved for unexpected expenses. So natural disasters, car repairs, God forbid, car accidents, loss of wages, things of that nature. A good rule of thumb is to have at least 12 months worth of your living expenses put into the savings account. So that can give you a nice cushion to get you through that period of time. And also, one thing that I like to stress in my personal life and in with business when I'm speaking with members is recognizing a want versus a need. So I know you could really, really want those shoes, but
Right.
do you need those shoes? And if it's in that savings account, it's probably not best to use it for things like that.
Right. Definitely agree with that. You never know when you'll need those funds. Like you said, it's really for these unexpected events. So,
Right.
you know, use your best judgment with that. Thanks everyone for watching today. If you have any questions or concerns, we're always happy to help you out. Please feel free to email us at community@hvcu.org. If you have any questions about the credit union or the products and services we offer, please visit our website at hvcu.org or email our contact center at info@hvcu.org. Thanks so much and good luck in college.